Welcome everyone. We've had a couple of weeks break and we've been working in the last few months on how to use your flash. And last time we discussed how to use the flash on camera, which is the most basic way that people start using their flash. And your homework was to have a bit of a practice putting your flash on the camera and rotating that head forward and back and round and bouncing the flash off the ceiling and the walls and just seeing the different effects that you had. And also to look at modifying your flash, and I suggested a small softbox, or alternatively just use some baking paper and an elastic band over the front and see how that makes your shadows much softer and people look less like deer in headlights when you flash them. What we're going to have a look at today is both on-camera and off-camera flash. But the next stage, I'm going to actually have to teach you how to use flash. So at the moment, we've really just looked at the mechanics of it, of where and why you would use flash and what sort of equipment do you need to do it. And I've almost been putting off the next step because I thought, I don't even know where to start. And then I realized you can't teach flash. It's like it's a general concept. It's like someone saying to you, I want to learn how to cook. And you go, okay, I'll teach you how to cook. And you teach them what saucepans are and how to turn the stove on and off and what equipment they'll need in the kitchen. But then when it comes to the hard bit, where you actually have to teach them how to cook, you have to say, well, what do you want to cook? Because that's the first question you need to ask yourself is, why do I need to use this flash? Why have I perceived a need for it? Where are the circumstances that I've identified that I would want it? And what is the sort of look that I want? And it's just like me saying to somebody, yes, I'll teach you how to cook. But what sort of cuisine do you want to cook? Are you wanting to do pastry and cakes? Are you wanting to do main courses, roasts and stews? Are you wanting to do Asian cooking and we'll need a wok? And so this is where I need some feedback from you guys as well. And you need to also put something into this of actually thinking about why you need flash and where you need flash and what you want it to look like. So that's what today's lesson is going to be more about, is what do you need to do to get to the point of me telling you, all right, this is how we'd use flash in this instance. We'll then finish off with you with a bit of homework of what you need to do. So when we were talking about flash, we said that on-camera flash, you only used on-camera flash when you had no other option, because you are extremely restricted in how you use that flash and its capability in terms of its distance from the subject and also from its actual physical position, that it doesn't necessarily give you the best lighting. Off-camera flash is where you actually control the flash via a trigger or a transmitter on your camera, and you can then place the flash in the most flattering position for the particular image you want to take. These were the off-camera flash pros and cons. And so now we're going to have a look at on-camera flash and what are the pros and cons. But the steps in using flash are the same irrespective of whether you're using off-camera or on-camera. But the most important thing is to, well, one, understand how light behaves and the exposures in your camera and the exposures of how to set them in your flash. And that's what I've asked you to do now for the last 6 weeks, is to really understand your flash units and really understand your camera. And I'm going to help you a little bit on that first one about how light behaves as we go along. But you've got to decide on where you want to use the flash and what sort of look you want and what sort of image aesthetic you're actually looking for. And a lot of people want to use flash because they think it'll make their photos look better. In many cases, well, it typically always does if someone really knows how to use flash. In many cases, just using natural window light and understanding how that works, or even just still lights, helps them improve their photography. Flash is fantastic in that it is like sunlight in a can. You can very much control the power of it and also its consistency. Whereas when you're using window light, I used to suffer from clouds going past just when I would get everything set up, all my exposures set up, everything positioned correctly, and I got to take the photo to discover the sun went in, and it then went in for 2 hours. And then after 2 hours was in a different place. The next most important aspect is to know what you want. And this was really highlighted to me last week. My husband, for a camera cup competition, needed to do a self-portrait. And I said, how's it going? Because I don't interfere. And he came in and he said, it's just looking terrible. I don't know what I'm doing. And he said, will you come and help me with the lighting? And I had a look what he was doing. And I said, well, what sort of lighting do you want? And he said, well, good lighting. And I said, okay, well, that's an assumption or a presumption. Can you show me an example of the sort of lighting that you would like? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, did you plan this shoot in terms of understanding what is the look that you were looking for? Were you looking for flat, even lighting? Were you looking for a shadow on one side? Were you looking for Rembrandt lighting? And he said, well, I didn't think of that. So I said, well, go away and find an image on the net somewhere that has lighting like you want it. Then I can help you. And it's a bit like someone saying to you, I want you to teach me how to cook. I'm just made a mess of what I'm making. And you go, well, what were you making? And they go, I don't know. I just threw everything in and hoped for the best. And me saying, well, you have to start off knowing what you plan to make in order for me to say, no, you need to, if you're making a roux, you need to make sure that flour and fat is stirred in appropriately before you add the liquid. I have to know what you're making before I can help you. Decide on the desired image. Aesthetic is about going out and doing a little bit of research about what you like in photographic images. You have to be able to manually set your camera exposures, and you have to be able to manually set your flash exposures. And they're the two things that I've been asking you to get practice with. And then the next step is just positioning your flash correctly and adjusting the exposures. So what we're going to do is have a look at what do I mean by deciding the aesthetic. This photo on the left here, you'll notice the first one is not mine. It's a beautiful photo of Audrey Hepburn and in Breakfast at Tiffany's. Absolutely classic photo. And there was a competition within the club that was take a photo inspired by a photo. So I just love the really bold look that Audrey Hepburn had on her face. And I just liked the lighting and everything about this image. So this young model here she's always reminded me a bit of Audrey Hepburn. So I just looked at the image on the left, worked out how it was lit, and then created that exact same lighting for the image on the right. And so that is a bit like tasting a recipe, reading the recipe, and then implementing the recipe by cooking it, that you almost guaranteed to get what you want if you knew what you were looking for in the first place. Same with the image on the right. The flowers are taken by David, I've forgotten his name. It's not David Thompson. I'll remember it. He does these lovely dreamy photographs, and I like taking photographs of flowers, but he always has this really dreamy aesthetic. And what I discovered, he actually shoots through stockings. So he stretches pantyhose over the front of his lens and shoots through that. So that was an aesthetic I thought I'd try. And so I looked at similar lighting, got an example of his, and how would this work with lighting? And he just used window lighting in this case, and I used window lighting. So by knowing what the aesthetic is that you want, you can create an image that you like. So I'm going to walk you through an example of choosing an image that you like and then working out what would you need to do in order to get a similar result. So this is a photograph I took recently of my dear grandson. And you can see what I wanted was to just absolutely focus on the subject. And in order to do that, you need no distractions in the background. Now, you can either use a background that's completely blank and black. And in this case, I actually had a black velvet background behind him. But in many cases, you can do this without having that, by just ensuring that your background is exposed to be completely black. And I've got numerous images where you would swear it was a black velvet background, where it was just in a room and I had exposed for the background. So the look I wanted was a look and feel where we highlight the subject with the flash and they're fully lit, but the background is dark. And this is a really beautiful aesthetic to give you a studio shot. This is done in my hallway. There's no studio here. Step one is to isolate the subjects from the background. And this is why I did it in the hallway, because I wanted to have the background as far away from the subjects as I possibly could. And the advantage of that is, one, it's going to be out of focus. And two, that I can make sure that the flash doesn't actually fall on it. Because you can't stop light once it goes past the subject, it will keep going and land on the background, and then you've got issues with distractions. If you are going to be taking this inside, try and get the subject as far away from anything distracting, like walls or furniture or anything, as far in front of that background as you can. And turn off all the lights and shut the curtains. You know, try and keep the background as dimly lit as possible for this look. And the subject is as far forward of the background as you can. If you're doing this outside, then face them so that their background is in shade. And you can make that background turn completely black by just managing your exposures. This is the first step in creating the aesthetic, is to get your background right and get the subject as far away from the background as possible. Now, that's an absolute, almost golden rule for whenever you're shooting portraits. If you can get that subject away from a background, so if they're in a garden and you can get them as far away from the back fence and the back distractions, then that will just all go to blur and give you a lovely bokeh effect like I've got behind me. We call that a bokeh effect. And it makes it look like studio lighting if you can get that distance. You've now got to work out where are you going to put the camera and what lens are you going to use. And you do that by interrogating the image. If you want an image like this is, you know, it's always best to go with one that's lit like you want and one that is positioned like you want, because that then gives you a clue on what lens to use. And you can see that I've been above them. They were sitting down on a chair and I was standing over the top of them with a reasonably wide angle lens. It was, well, it's considered a standard lens, around 50. For me, it's a wide angle because I'm always way up at the other end rather than down at the 50. But because I wanted to be right in their face, I needed to use a wide angle lens. And so I used my 24-70, which gave me a bit of zoom. And that gave me a bit of flexibility in terms of how wide I made it. And I just positioned myself in different spots and took some test shots until I got them how I wanted them. So once I've got the test shots and I've just used my normal exposures to get those test shots, I now set the camera to make sure that my background's going to be pure black. because I'm going to light this using the flash. When we talk about the background, we're talking about the ambient light. So we're going to set the camera to register the ambient light as pure black. We start off setting the camera. Nearly always, we start with an ISO of 100. The ISO that gives us the less noise and the less graininess. So start at your lowest ISO. For portraits, we usually do anything from 1.4 to 8.0 for portraits. 1.4, 2.8 if you're just doing a single person. But in this case, I had 2 people. And so as soon as we go to 2 people, we need 5.6 to 8.0, because that gives us the depth of field that they'll both be in focus at the same time. So they're the 2 things that are fixed. We've got our ISO, we want it the least grainy as possible. We want our depth of field to give us that lovely sharpness in the face, but blur off as it goes towards the back of them, and it also guarantees blurring the background. So now that only leaves us our shutter speed. And in this case, I'd suggest you start at about 100th of a second and go up to 200th. Now with flash, you'll find that your flash won't let you go past 200th of a second or 250th of a second. That's a whole other story. But right now we're just going to, you'll find in 99% of cases, it'll take you where you need to go at 200th of a second. So you take a test shot. The test shot, have a look at the histogram, pure black. You need a little bit of information in there just to give a bit of texture to the background, but visually it appears to be pure black. If you put it on your screen and buried, like pixel peeked it, you would go down and you would see there would be a little bit of texture in there. But that's now guaranteed our background. So all we need to do then is light the subject. And this is one of the best tips anybody ever gave me about trying to mimic someone else's lighting, is that the eyeballs work like a sphere. And when you put a light on a sphere and see the reflection, you see exactly where the light is. And the best spheres that we automatically have in a portrait are people's eyes. So if you ever want to know where they positioned the light, zoom in and have a look at their eyes. And it will tell you exactly where I positioned my light. So you can see it's sort of a front and above this baby's head. And that 45 degree in front, 45 degree above, so 45 degree off center and 45 degree pointing down is one of the most flattering lighting setups that you can give people. And I always recommend people start with that lighting setup, because it's the one that, it's what creates Rembrandt light, which was always always considered the most flattering light. And it allows for shadows, it allows for a 3D effect in the face. So if you know nothing else, 45 degrees coming into the subject and 45 degrees coming down, and then position your light. The other thing is we need to know is how close to place this flash. Do we put it behind us, or, like a long way away, or do we put it right up close to the subject? Now, in this case, it was right up close to the subject. And how can you tell that? Well, the shadow fell off very quickly. And this is when before I was talking about you need to understand how light behaves. Because the closer you put a torch to a wall, more quickly the light falls off. So that it'll light that spot, but it won't light the wall around. The more you pull back, the longer it takes for that light to fall off. That you'll see a great big circle and then a feathering of the light as it goes out. So if you see, like in this arrow here, that the light has fallen off very quickly into shade, then that's telling you the flash was very close. And I only had it about 1 meter away. It was just out of shot. But what I wanted was that really soft feathering of light into the shadows. What it's indicating is the flash, if the light had been more evenly spread across the scene. So if everything in that scene was lit evenly, it immediately tells me that the flash was further back, because that would actually light it more evenly. So now we've worked out where the flash was and how close it was. The next thing we need to check out is for the sharpness of the shadows. And whilst a shadow may fall off very quickly, the edge of it is the feathering. And the amount of feathering a shadow has is an indication of the size of the light source. So very small light sources, like a torch, will create a really sharp shadow around noses and things like that. A very big light source will cause very soft fall off. And you can see here the amount of feathering in the shadows. So this means the light source was large. Now we know that a flash is very small, and I've already told you it's right up close. So that means it had to have a softbox on it, something to make that light dissipate. This is where we need to work out. I would use a softbox, but if you haven't got a softbox and you've only got flash on the camera, then you're going to have to bounce that light, because it has to come from a big source. If you bounce the light off the ceiling, you can see you've immediately increased the size of that light source. And the larger that light source, the softer the shadows are, and it makes it look less flashed. So that's why when I say when we're out shooting, if we're on a workshop, love the cloudy days, because they give beautiful soft shadows. You know, the times when you've really struggled to get a decent photograph, and I've said to you it was because the sun was so bright and it was overhead. That's the sharpness of the shadows. They're impossible to work with, but lovely, smooth, soft shadows just give you gorgeous lighting. So if you haven't got a softbox, try the baking paper with an elastic band around your flash head, and also, even if you've got your baking paper on, bounce it if it's on the camera. So if you've got on-camera flash, the next thing you have to put your flash on the camera, a softbox on the flash, turn your flash power, the mode to manual, and when you turn it to manual, you'll see you have a range of 0 to 1. Set it to half power. I always start halfway, and then from halfway know whether I need more or I need less. There's no point starting at 1 and incrementally coming down to half to discover you need 1/32. You may as well start in the middle and either go up or go down if there's too much or too less. If we're using it on camera, we have to work out where we aim that flash at the ceiling to give us the beams coming down at that 45-degree angle we talked about. Now that's a real fiddle. That's why I always suggest using off-camera flash, because that's much more difficult to do. Do a test shot. Increase your flash or decrease the flash. If it's too high, decrease it. If it's too little, increase it. Just go little increments, and have a look at the lighting, and just make sure that everything is lit that you want lit. What's most important is that you actually get the catch light in the eye. If the catch light isn't in the eye, it means your flash isn't positioned so that it's bouncing from the ceiling correctly. This is a very difficult shot to get with your camera, with the flash on camera. If you have the capability to take your flash off the camera, if you haven't got a lighting stand like this, then you can just place the flash on a table or a bench or a ladder or whatever in the position that you need it. These soft boxes, you know, you can buy $5 to $10 a little one like this. And when I tried to get a photo off the web yesterday for these, they're $50, $60. They're not that expensive. Lighting stands, I've picked up 90% of my lighting stands in op shops. People buy them, don't know what to do with them, give them away. $5 in an op shop. In fact, one of my best big soft boxes, $5 in an op shop. In fact, my very best one, it's 8 foot round. It's an octo box, free on Gumtree. Possible, as I realised yesterday, to teach you how to use flash in a generic sense. Every Every single ascetic is a different problem to solve. And what I want you to do is get practice in that problem solving so that you'll know what to look for and know, do you take the flash further away? Do you put it closer up? Do you turn the flash up? Do you turn it down? Do you put lighting on the background? All of those things comes from that image. And it's a bit like if you are someone that likes to cook. If you eat something when you're out, you can almost tell what's in the ingredients and how they cooked it, because you're used to problem solving that. So that's what we're going to do. So thank you.